Picture this. You are standing on a street corner in a city of ghosts. The dust of millennia clings to the air, thick with silence. The brickwork of the buildings around you has been fused, melted into a glassy black rock. Skeletons, untouched for 4,000 years, lie where they fell in the streets, their arms shielding their faces from a sudden, blinding light. This was Mohenjo-Daro, and its people died from a heat hotter than the sun. This was not a volcano or a simple fire. It was the signature of a weapon born of a terrifying science, a technology that powered flying machines and waged war on a scale we have only just rediscovered. Before the silence and the ash, there was an age of impossible wonders, a time chronicled not in history books, but in the brittle pages of humanity's oldest records, the Sanskrit epics of ancient India. This was a world of Vimanas, celestial vehicles described in staggering detail. From small, swift chariots that could travel at the speed of thought to gargantuan flying cities housing thousands. But the masters of this world, the beings known as the Devas and the Asuras, were not benevolent gods. They were the story's dysfunctional tyrants, all-powerful figures whose deep-seated pride, jealousy, and paranoia manifested as public cruelty and catastrophic misrule. Their cosmic squabbles were not divine sport. They were geopolitical conflicts waged with a terrifying arsenal. Humanity existed in their shadow as the helpless victims, our ancestors trapped by a power they could not comprehend, their lives and lands mere collateral damage in a game of gods. Their story is one of suffering and a struggle to maintain a sense of self against an overwhelming force, and their fate was almost always tragic. The terrifying will of these tyrants was not enacted by their hands alone. Between them and the masses was a necessary and tragic layer of humanity: the complicit system enforcers. These were the kings, priests, and warrior castes of the human realms, morally compromised figures who carried out the divine will out of fear, ambition, or a desensitized acceptance of the brutal system they served. They were the ones who rallied the armies and unleashed a horrifying array of conventional superweapons. The epics describe the Agni-astra, a weapon of inextinguishable fire that could scorch legions, and the Varunastra, which could unleash catastrophic floods to wash away entire armies. With each use, the moral fabric of the world tore a little more, and the enforcers became numb to the horror, their actions paving the way for an even greater atrocity that was foreshadowed in hushed, terrified tones. The slow, grinding horror of the war was merely the overture. The true climax arrived in a form so devastating it would scar the memory of the human race for millennia. A weapon spoken of with a mixture of reverence and sheer terror: the Brahmastra. In the grand, tragic opera of the Mahabharata, its deployment is the moment the world truly breaks, the point of no return. The texts describe a single projectile charged with all the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flame, as bright as 10,000 suns, rose in all its splendor. The light itself was a weapon, a searing, divine wrath that burned shadows permanently onto stone and melted soldiers where they stood. The descriptions grow more chilling, more specific, mirroring a clinical account of a nuclear detonation. The very air caught fire. The water in rivers began to boil. Warriors who survived the initial blast felt their hair and fingernails fall out. Pottery in nearby villages shattered without apparent cause. Birds flying in the sky fell dead, their color turning from a healthy brown to a deathly white. This is not the poetic exaggeration of a primitive storyteller. It is a perfect, step-by-step account of thermal pulse, blast wave, electromagnetic pulse, and the horrifying, creeping death of radiation sickness. Can you imagine the psychological torture of witnessing such a thing? The scars from this ancient, terrible war remain etched upon the face of our Earth. The vitrified ruins and radioactive skeletons of Mohenjo-Daro are not an isolated mystery. Travel to the Great Sand Sea on the border of Libya and Egypt. There, scattered across hundreds of square kilometers, you will find chunks of pristine, yellow-green glass. It is remarkably pure silica, vitrified at an extreme temperature, and it bears an uncanny resemblance to trinitite, the fused desert sand left behind at the site of the first atomic bomb test in 1945. Consider the vitrified hill forts in Scotland, Ireland, and France, their stone walls melted into a solid, glassy mass. These are not geological oddities. They are the haunted, irradiated debris fields of a global conflict. A story told not in history books, but in melted rock and poisoned earth. Why then, if our world was once home to such power, is our history silent? The answer is perhaps the most tragic part of this entire chronicle. The survivors chose to forget. The mystery is not what happened, but why it was deliberately erased. Faced with a planetary death spasm and a profound civilizational trauma, the inheritors of the broken world made a decision. They realized their science, their advanced technology, was a seductive poison that would always lead to annihilation. So they orchestrated the Great Forgetting. The knowledge was systematically suppressed, dismantled, and hidden. The hard data of physics and engineering was transformed into the poetic language of magic and religion. The Vimana was no longer a machine of mercury vortex engines. It became a divine chariot pulled by celestial swans. The terrifying Brahmastra was no longer a product of advanced particle physics. It became a gift from a god, its use governed by spiritual merit rather than strategic calculation. It was the greatest intellectual quarantine in human history. Designed to prevent a recurrence, we stand now at what we arrogantly call the dawn of a new age. But we have not learned. This dark historical drama forces a somber, philosophical reflection on our own time. We have not invented anything new, we have merely reinvented the means of our own destruction. The dysfunctional tyrants are not gone. Their paranoid, power-obsessed archetype is alive in our own leaders. When J.W.W.N. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, witnessed the first Trinity test, he famously quoted the Mahabharata, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Was this a mere literary flourish? Or a moment of horrifying recognition? A subconscious memory stirring within the human spirit? A sudden, chilling realization that he had not created something new, but had merely rediscovered a terrible, ancient secret. We are left with the unsettling question of whether we are now living through the final days of our own cycle, doomed to repeat the tragedy and become the source material for the myths and cautionary tales of the next world.